Hello everyone. Today's live stream, I'm going to read a story from Good Housekeeping magazine. It was published in the year of 1922, and the article I came across is titled "The Story of a Trip with the First Lady of the Land Will Show You Russia at Home" by Bessie Beatty. I hope you guys get to enjoy it. It's a bit of a long story, so let's settle in. I do not know what Ekaterina Ivanovna would be like at a diplomat's dinner or a dansant. Diplomats' dinners in Russia are shadowy memories that sit with the Soviet of ghosts in the white marble hall of the nobles, when it is not occupied by a communist congress or a trade union meeting. The nearest approach to the dansant is a secret cabaret run with the knowledge of everybody, including the chica, to provide the adventurous foreigner with the thrill of the forbidden. The world in which the First Lady of Russia moves is a planet or two apart from these. As wife of the President Michael Ivanovich Kalenin, her home is in the Kremlin in Moscow, but she has a queendom in her own right, far away, and there she lives in a simple peasant's cottage. Ekaterina Ivanovna is president of the Volis Soviet in the gubernia of Tver, and there, by the choice of the peasants, she rules the destinies of the 44 Russian villages. When the President of Russia boasts husband-like about his wife, it is not of her beauty, her game of bridge, or her superior apple pies that he speaks. He tells you that she can plow a furrow, sow a field, build a house, or reap a harvest better than he can. Riding with her for days across snowy plains, through the tiny clusters of peasant cottages that form her dynasty, I discovered that the President of Russia is not alone in his opinion. The eyes of the women are lit with affection when they speak her name, and the men of Tver say there is not a better peasant in Russia. Than this there is no higher tribute from one peasant to another. Even the hard baker veneer of cynicism of the American motion picture photographer who went with me cracked completely under her influence. She dubbed her uncle because of his good-natured bullying of her. He ended by declaring, "This country'd be all right if they had a few more like her." But it remained for the girl from Chicago to speak the perfect word of description. She's the best next-door neighbor in Russia. If there is a sick calf, a sick baby, or a sick soul within 50 miles, they send for Ekaterina Ivanovna. Her talents are not those one usually attributes to President's wife. She speaks no language but her own. She probably wouldn't know whether to place the guest of honor on the right hand side or the left, but she has an inner courtesy deeper than custom, a sense of the righteous of things that has nothing to do with oyster forks. For a problem that must be solved in action, or a trouble that must be shared in silence, she is true genius. At the end of the week, I doubted if there was a more useful woman in all Russia, or a happier one. She carries her strong, muscular body with a free swing. Her gray-blue eyes are wide-set and kind. Her nose is frankly upturned. Generous lips part across strong white teeth, and her laugh is rich and full of deep content. Going home with Ekaterina Ivanovna was like making a pilgrimage into the very heart of Russia. The cottage, built largely with her own capable hands in the village where Kalinin was born, is a replica of a million cottages from Vladivostok to Archangel. The little babushka who lived there can neither read nor write, but, like millions of other wise old Russian women, she has a lore of her own, reaped in the toil of endless white summer days, and gathered from the long black silence of winter nights. Two women more removed from the proud German princess and first lady of Russia, living fearfully in vast, chilly palaces under the spell of the monk Rasputin, than these two simple daughters of the Russian earth, it would be difficult to find. Yet, judged by every measuring stick of democracy, Ekaterina Ivanovna is far more representative of this peasant country emerging from feudalism than her unhappy predecessor. Continued on page 122. Let's go to page 122. It was on a cold let's see, 122. Hmm. Oh, I think I know what's going on. Okay, let's see. I knew this was gonna happen. I gotta look for the page of 122. Almost there. 122. 111. 122. There you go. It was on a cold night in November that I went with her to Tver. She had been in Moscow for a week, visiting her husband and 3 children in the Kremlin, buying glass for the windows of the village schoolhouse, studying the intricacies of the new food tax, and battling with the president and his government for the rights of her constituents. She met us at the depot in Moscow, where the station master and a Kalenin soldier sits for us on the wooden benches of a third-class carriage. Besides Uncle and a girl from Chicago, there was a Russian in the party, Raphael Robinston, grandnephew of the composer and chief advisor to Kalenin in working out the peasants' food tax. We were headed for Petchetova, Ekaterina Ivanovna's capital, 2 days away, and then to Troitsa, the home village, farther on through the forest. We tempted Ekaterina Ivanovna to speak of herself. She did it briefly, simply, as she does all things. "Life is never as you think it will be," she said. "I know even when I was little that I should have a good life, and I felt sorry for all the poor people who could not be happy as I. I have always worked. When I was 8, I was a nurse girl. When I was 16, I told my mother I must go away to find a larger life. My father loved me, and he gave me 2 gold rubles. I went to Narva and worked in the linen mills until I was 20. Then I went to Petrograd. It was there I met Michael Ivanovich and became interested in the revolution. I suppose at heart I am a bourgeois, for I have always wanted just to have a home and my husband and children with me. It is hard being so much away from them, but in Russia now we are all needed and we cannot think of ourselves." At 2 the train stopped. Immediately Ekaterina Ivanovna was surrounded by husky peasants looking in the dark like giants in sheepskin, shubas, and bushy fur hats. Suddenly the arms of the peasant woman went round Ekaterina Ivanovna's neck, and she was soundly kissed on both cheeks. It was Nura, who keeps house for her in Pechetova. She had driven all day and half the night to meet the train. Through the noise came the whiny of a horse. Beyond the crowd, the proud lifted head of Kalenin's Siberian gray mare reared in welcome to its mistress. In the chatter and bustle of every Russian going and coming, we were tucked on to wooden wagons and sat, chattering through the icy night, to meet the Volga, where it starts on its twisting journey to the Caspian. Yekaterina Ivanovna refused to ride. She strode on alone ahead of us. Beyond the river, the quaint old town of Kimry lay asleep. From the black steeples of the churches, silhouetted against the sky, a shower of bells shattered the chilly morning silence at regular intervals. These and the shouts of the boatmen on a primitive ferry coming to meet us were the only sounds. One house was awake and beckoning, and here at 4 o'clock we stopped with a friend of Ekaterina Ivanovna to wait for daylight. The brass samovar was boiling, and the valeniki, those high felt boots, which are the ugliest and most consoling of Russian interventions, were warmed and waiting for our feet. When we awoke, the snow was falling. Winter had come. It is time in Russia when no driver risks the roads. They are cut in deep ruts from the recent rains. It is too late for a wagon's comfort and too early for a sleigh's safety. No public conveyance in Kimry would undertake the journey. The officials of the city, Soviet, arriving to pay their respects to Ekaterina Ivanovna, came to the rescue. One of them went to the telephone to ask for government wagons, and the telephone was out of order. He borrowed a knife and hairpin and repaired the damage. Soon the only available vehicle in Kimry were at the door. One was a small rickety isotchik with a woven wicker basket top, the other a telega. Yekaterina Ivanovna stuffed the basket with straw and bundled me in with the girl from Chicago. With swift, deft, motherly fingers, she had wound our heads in warm woolen shawls and wrapped our feet with cloth inside the felt valinki. All day we bumped and bounced over a choppy road. It was the moment when Russian earth is most desolate. The low, flat, marshy waste is barren, and the arms of the naked trees seem to be pleading with winter to come over. The storm increased. Once rounding a sharp twist in the road, the horse sheed, and the body of the rickety old izvozchik slipped its place and turned us out on the ground. After that, Ekaterina Ivanovna moved us to the safer but more back-breaking telega. Nothing upsets the poise of a Russian telega. The crude, springless wagon of seasoned birchwood is elastic as a rubber ball. It grew out of the rutty roads through centuries of evolution. Yekaterina Ivanovna was everywhere at once. As night came on, picking our way through the forest, we heard her name again and again. Yekaterina Ivanovna, Yekaterina Ivanovna, usually was the solemn young driver from the Kimry Soviet who had missed the train. 3 times that night we lost our way in a snowstorm, and always Yekaterina Ivanovna found it again. Once it was Nyura who called her to the rescue. We were stuck in a ditch, and she was afraid to lead the horse across for fear of upsetting the Americans. We slept that night in a chayanya. A chayanya is a Russian institution like the Old English Inn, an tempting one on a winter night. Here the traveling peasant buys his cattle of kipetok, his tea, his cabbage soup, and whatever the house and his purse can afford. The right to curl up on a chair and benches for a night's sleep is his for taking. It is a right that will last in Russia until railroads come to demolish distance. A noisy snore from the corner announced that someone was already exercising it. I rode alone the next day with Nura driving, kneeling Russian fashion on the front of the telega or running alongside talking to the horse. Sitting on that springless wagon with the snow falling around me, I learned something of Russia that Moscow could never teach. Through a still gray, sad world, I saw an endless procession of lonely men and women down the centuries, sitting in just such wagons as this, trekking across plains and through forests, learning to endure. This is all that Russia has learned. She has not mastered the earth, the elements. She has only learned to endure them, to survive them. Pechetova was out to meet us. It is a gay, fantastic little town, topping a low, gently sloping hill. From the village green, the shimmering roofs of 20 villages glistered like Ural crystals, flung out upon the snowy hillside. From a distance we saw the black velvet domes rising above the white body of the village church. Some gay predecessor of the futuristic must have made his home in Pechetova a century or so ago. Around the black iron church fence marched a giddy parade of rainbow-colored glass globes, like balls upon a Christmas tree. In the churchyard beyond, the tall wooden crosses were painted bright blue, scarlet, yellow, green, and orange. Window frames and barn doors picked up the dazzling color and design. Fantastic animals danced atop the roofs, and curious, outstretched hands were beckoned welcome to the visitor. The government house where Ekaterina Ivanovna presides is a glorified peasant's cottage. It is built as they all are, one house inside another. There were double doors and windows and a packing of moss between the logs to defeat any errant wind that might try to steal in out of the cold night. Ekaterina Ivanovna took her place behind a small flat-topped desk. Above her head was a photograph of Trotsky in a white gold frame. She passed to her associates her silver cigarette case with the big brow and the bushy beard of Karl Marx engraved upon it, then went quickly to work. I glanced at the men gathered there to help her make government for 11,000 neighbors. War and revolution has brought something of the outside world into this village. The safety razor had wrought mighty changes. Only one man was unshaven. The secretary, who read the minutes, a boy in his 20s, had been to school in Petrograd and came back to help his village. He, like all the others, was plainly worshipful of the chief. Every peasant meeting in Russia discussed the bewildering food tax. Ekaterina Ivanovna had captured the expert and brought him here to explain to her people. Rubinstein talked for 2 hours. They returned shrewd, pertinent questions as to how much honey they might give for how many bees, and how much milk from a cow. Then Ekaterina Ivanovna adroitly led the discussion to the broader field. The wide world walked through this remote village meeting. The man from Moscow talked to Lloyd George of international debts, American help to the starving, the value of the Polish mark, the finance and political economy of a dozen peoples searching for a road to lead them back from chaos. Ekaterina Ivanovna's silver cigarette case went round and round. Villagers strolled into the hall and stood at the door listening. In the dim light, one saw only a crowd of eyes, wide, round, wondering, and knew that every word was like a pebble dropped into a pool to spread and make ever-widening circles of wondering eyes in the villages behind and beyond. Ekaterina worked late that night, and she had done a day's work before we climbed into the telegas the next afternoon. There had been a fire during her absence. One of the peasants has lost everything. She swiftly organized the community building bee to make him a new home. A poor peasant came to explain that he couldn't pay the food tax. She deferred its payment and told him how to increase his yield. Another had no wood for the winter. She wrote to Kimri for a permit to cut from the forest. She dealt with every question briefly, soundly, effectively. Many of the talking bureaucrats of Moscow could have profited from watching her at work. It was late that night when we reached Ekaterina Ivanovna's own village, which is also the village of Babushka and Michael Ivanovich. We came upon it suddenly out of the depths of the wintry pine woods through which we had been driving for hours across the deepening carpet of snow. It is set in a rim of trees, off in a clean white world all its own. First the lights twinkling welcome from a distance, then a row of log houses warmly glowing, and last the house of Ekaterina herself and Babushka. Ekaterina Ivanovna ran ahead to warn her mother of our coming. She was bathing Ekaterina's 9-year-old Leda, preparatory to tucking her into bed atop the kitchen stove. She dried her hands, straightened her platok, and hurried out to meet us. She was angry with Ekaterina Ivanovna for not warning her that she might prepare a feast. When I slept, I dreamed that Ekaterina Ivanovna came with many people, and I had nothing to give them to eat, she said. In my dream, I said to Ekaterina, "Why did you not write me so I could prepare for the friends of Michael Ivanovich?" And now all that I dreamed is true. She is a tiny thing, this little mother of the President of Russia, tiny and formidable, with her small round red cheeks like winter apples, fresh like a peasant's girl. Her eyes were wise, and she has a trick of crinkling up her face into a smile that reaches from her jelly round button of a chin well up under her flowered kerchief, flowered handkerchief. The comfortable peasant's house is a battleground of old ideas and new ones. The story of a peasant's family, of a revolution, of Russia itself is written on the walls. From the shelf in the corner, Babushka's icons look down upon the dinner table. Ekaterina's idols of the revolution, Marx, Engels, and Lenin, are ranged against the golden-crusted saints. The walls are lined with crude pine benches, made like the house from the logs cut in the nearby forest. In the window, Babushka's row of stunted plants, a red geranium, a fuchsia, two dwarfed chrysanthemums, as much as institution as the samovar and the balalaika, as struggling as Russia itself. Babushka crossed herself in front of the icons before she sat down to the black bread and pickled mushrooms that were our evening fare. In times she forgot to be angry with Ekaterina Ivanovna and talked of Michael Ivanovich, of the village and of life. "It is difficult now," she said. "There's much to do. Michael Ivanovich no longer comes to work as a peasant. He has much business in Moscow. I know that his affairs are serious because they are affairs of the government. Ekaterina Ivanovna has no time to work here because she works as a president of the Volst. Masha and I must do it all, but I am a simple peasant, so I must work until I die. Life is not simple. Like a peasant, I must pay a tax to the government. Then I am a religious woman, and when a poor priest comes, I must give him money. The priest cannot work like a peasant. All the time he must pray to God. No, it is not simple." We led her to Michael Ivanovich. It was not a difficult route. "He is now the President of the Republic," she said, "but for me he is still a little boy. When he was 13, he went away to work in Petrograd, and when he came each year for 2 weeks, he read much, and I said to him, 'Why do you read all the night? I must pay for the petroleum.' Michael Ivanovich said, 'Mother, I must read much to understand all the history of the world. I must read to understand why the life of the peasant is unhappy. I must know all to find how to change the unhappiness.' When he was 20, he had much business with political affairs. Then he went to prison. I cried much like a mother, but I did nothing, because Michael Ivanovich was a man, not a child." She brushed a tear out of each blue eye with the recollection of those times. Now I see that Michael Ivanovich knew well what was good when he read. Now I am the mother of the president. But it does not matter. I am just a simple peasant who has a good son. She turned to Rubinstein. "When you go to Moscow, kiss him for me," she said, "and say to him that in our village, in our house, all is good. We have wood, we have bread, and it is warm." At 5 next morning I heard her in the kitchen preparing a belated feast. When we got up, the table was already covered with cottage cheese tarts and great turnovers filled with chopped cabbage. Ekaterina Ivanovna was milking the cow. That morning we walked out along the edge of a tiny river that winds through Ekaterina's village across the stretch of forest to visit a communal farm where she cast an expert eye over livestock and blacksmithing and woodworking shops. On the way she stopped at the village schoolhouse with its meager stock of primitive readers, tumbled and torn, and its bundles of little twigs gathered for counters. These, a few stubs of pencils, and the enthusiasm of two young missionaries of education were all that the village had upon which to build its culture. And now our visit was over. We had been close, very close to the Russia of today, and seen a glimpse into the Russia of tomorrow. The woman on the president's front porch had become for me a symbol of something strong, clean, sound, building under the chaos of the hour. Well, and this is the end of the story from a magazine called Good Housekeeping, volume 74, published in the year of 1922. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and feel free to share your thoughts and comments on what you guys heard. Thank you again for stopping